Very unwise decision.
Save your own life.
Two men just knocked on my door. The fear in her voice.
You can't keep ignoring me. You can't.
The following stories tell the tale of three disturbed and terrifying stalkers who took their obsessions with their victims to the next level. Many people use Facebook as a way to connect with friends and family members, as well as to meet new people. Kristin Pratt was a college student from Florida who was using Facebook for these same reasons. Unfortunately, her entire life was turned upside down when she received a friend request from a man by the name of Patrick McConey. Patrick and Kristin had gone to high school together and were living in the same area at the time. Kristin barely had any memory of going to school with him. Patrick was wanting to catch up, and so Kristin obliged, and the two shared a few normal messages back and forth. But it didn't take long for the messages to turn weird and creepy, giving Kristin a weird vibe. Patrick's messages became more and more intense, and he made it clear to her that he had strong feelings for her, despite not really knowing her at all.
I have no idea why I like you. I don't even know you.
He bombarded her on social media and sent her strange and at times even threatening video clips of himself. He claimed he didn't know why he felt the way that he did for her, but that he couldn't help himself. At first, Kristin assumed Patrick would eventually get bored, give up, and leave her alone. Unfortunately, he only seemed to become more and more obsessed. She realized she was going to need to get some professional help for her own safety, so she called the police. They didn't provide her with any help. They claimed because Patrick didn't know Kristin's home address or where she worked, there was nothing that they could do. Kristin was left on her own to try and protect herself.
First called the police, and they said, well, does he know where you work? And I said, no, and they said, does he know where you live? And I said, no, and they said, nothing we can do.
Meanwhile, Patrick's videos were getting more and more disturbing. He would place his face close to the camera, his eyes wide and wild, while he would claim to be on a mission to win Kristin over.
I've been sent on a mission to make Kristin Pratt feel warm and fuzzy.
Patrick began demanding Kristin talk to him, seeming to not be at all discouraged by the fact that she was not responding to him. He even threatened her life.
Email me today. It's up to you now. Save your own life.
Patrick seemed to think that he could scare Kristin into agreeing to be with him.
You don't want me for a life, Kristin Pratt? That's a very unwise decision.
In addition to being completely obsessed with Kristin, Patrick also had some very twisted, dark, and violent fantasies about her. He wasn't afraid to describe these to her in various messages, explaining in great detail all the things he wanted to do to her. This included tying her up, blindfolding her, and taking advantage of her in the most disturbing ways. He would even send Kristin inappropriate pictures and would blow up her phone until her voicemail was packed full. After dealing with Patrick's stalking for many frightening weeks, Kristin finally secured a legal win that she very much needed. She got an injunction against him. This meant that legally he was supposed to end his harassment against Kristin. Of course, he paid this injunction very little mind and continued to send his horrifying messages. He would flip between threatening her and declaring his love for her.
Whatever you want, whatever makes you happy, that's what I want.
Kristin would soon realize that it didn't matter what legal action she took, or anything else she did to try to escape Patrick and his stalking. He would overcome these obstacles every time, and continue again and again. He let her know that he wasn't bothered by her attempts to get rid of him, and definitely wasn't going to back down.
I'm here, I'm not going anywhere.
Patrick seemed to believe that if he and Kristin were really meant to be together in the end, that all of his scary behavior and threats were excusable. He seemed to truly feel no guilt for making Kristin's life a living hell.
Alright, Kristin, look, all I'm asking is to let me over one night. You can't keep ignoring me. You can't.
Things escalated even further when Patrick was able to track down where Kristin worked and began showing up outside. Kristin was terrified and at this point worried for her life. Realizing that Patrick wasn't going to back down and that the police weren't going to do anything to help her, she took matters into her own hands. She would begin drastically changing her appearance time and time again. She would dye her hair, cut it different lengths, and would wear sunglasses in hopes that she wouldn't be recognized. When she was asked how often she was changing her appearance, she replied,
How often were you changing your look?
Probably once every 2 months, maybe even more than that sometimes.
Patrick had stolen so much of Kristin's life and all sense of normalcy. Every day when she would leave her home, she would wonder if that day would be her last, and if Patrick would finally make good on his word and end her life. She felt helpless and unable to take her life into her own hands. But finally, Kristin got the break she needed. A policeman named Officer Conway was on active patrol when he happened to spot Patrick acting suspiciously. He had a backpack and was sneaking around. On a hunch that Patrick was likely a car burglar, Officer Conway stopped and decided to investigate. He opened up Patrick's backpack, expecting to find items stolen from local vehicles. What he found instead was more disturbing than anything he could have anticipated. He found Patrick's camera, and on it were the countless disturbing clips that Patrick recorded and sent to Kristin in hopes of winning her over. The video clips were very upsetting to Officer Conway, and he knew he needed to look into the investigation further. It didn't take but one quick look into Patrick's background for the officer to find a wide variety of charges against him, many related to Kristin and his stalking her. There were countless police reports and lots of very harrowing information. After figuring out Kristin's contact information, she gave her a call and asked her to give her the whole story from start to finish. She did just that, and by the time she was finished, Officer Conway was convinced that Kristin was in very serious danger. He told her that she believed that Patrick would likely take her own life. She didn't disagree with that assessment and explained that this was what she had been trying to get the police to realize this whole time.
That's what I've been trying to tell everybody, but nobody wants to help me.
When Officer Conway presented the case to the state, they also agreed that if something was not done to protect her, Kristin's days were most likely numbered. At long last, Patrick was finally arrested. "I want to apologize to her definitely for scarring her," he said, "and I want to point out I never did any physical danger to her," Patrick said in court. He faced 19 charges of cyberstalking, which he pleaded guilty to, and was sentenced to 4 years behind bars. However, he would ultimately get released early and returned to the streets. Very shortly after Patrick's release from prison, he was interviewed by the local press. While a reporter tried to get to the bottom of why Patrick acted as he did, a very unsettling fact became clear. Patrick did not believe that he ever engaged in stalking. In fact, he didn't think he did anything wrong at all.
I wasn't, because that would imply that someone was in danger. So that's why I would just say I was looking for someone. And other than that, I would say I was typing under the influence. That's what I call it. That's a TUI.
Patrick was banned from using the internet and told he could never contact Kristin again. Unfortunately, Patrick's early release had solidified for Kristin the fact that she would never truly get the justice she deserved. She realized that from that point on, she would never live a normal life like everyone else. She would live in fear for the rest of her life. Today, Kristin is completely on edge wherever she goes. She is careful to alert a family member or friend whenever she goes somewhere by herself, and always parks as close to the building as she can manage.
This is my life now, this is what you live with.
Kristin was so in fear for her life that she decided to move to a whole new city. For obvious reasons, she didn't disclose the name of this new city. However, she did make it clear that she doesn't think that by moving away, it will truly mean she has escaped Patrick. She is plagued by the terrifying memories and will spend the rest of her life wondering if he's out in the shadows, just waiting for her. Kiki Powell was born in January of 1981 in Maryland, where she would grow up and attend high school. Kiki's mother, Judy Forrest, recalled her daughter's unique personality.
She was feisty, she was fast, she was adorable, a fun little kid, and we just had a ball raising her.
Upon graduation, Kiki decided to join the Army. This was a decision that totally shocked and worried her mother.
I thought, oh my God, they're gonna kill her because she wasn't used to any kind of physical activity, but she was determined.
Kiki's best friend, Ayanna Ball Ward, was also surprised by her decision.
We had been friends since high school. I was like, you gonna leave me and go to the military, She just looked at me and she said, Ayanna, I gotta do it.
But Kanika followed through with her plan. After doing a tour in Korea, she returned back to the United States where she got a job at Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory. While her job was related to security, what exactly she did at work was top secret. She wasn't allowed to talk to anybody about it, and even her own mom knew very little details.
It had to do something with military. Like she would have to fly to California or she would have to go to Florida. But what she did there, I did not know. She couldn't tell me that.
On August 23, 2008, Kanika was at home alone in her apartment in Prince George County, Maryland. There was a knock at the door around 7 p.m. and before opening the door, Kanika called out to ask who was there. Strangely, there was no response. When she peered through her peephole, she saw a man that she didn't recognize standing there. She asked him what he wanted and he claimed to be with the FBI and wanted to talk to her about an investigation. Despite the fact that the man knew her full name, Kanika was skeptical about his story. She didn't believe the FBI badge he presented her with looked authentic, so she asked him for a photo ID and a warrant. When the man was unable to provide either item, he simply walked away. Suspicious, Kanika walked to her bedroom and peered out the window. She could see the man continuing to walk away from her apartment. She thought she could hear another man's voice calling out to him to go the other way. Kanika called her mom and told her what had happened.
It was a Saturday evening, I'll never forget. She called and said, "Ma, these two men just knocked on my door saying that they were from the FBI. She said they called her by name. She said, I've already called FBI to find out if they had sent anybody.
But the FBI claimed that the men were likely simply pretending to be from the FBI. Kanika was so scared by what happened that she no longer felt safe. She wrote an email to her family and friends in which she explained the details of what happened. This email was her way of letting them know to be on the lookout for any strange behavior. This is what she wrote. I just want to share with you the scariest thing that happened to me this weekend. Saturday evening around 7 p.m., a man was knocking at my door. As you all may know, I live alone, so I asked who he was, and he didn't answer. She began. She went on to write that the man claimed that he was looking for someone with her same name, something that greatly distressed her. When she told him that she wasn't going to let him in, he eventually left. She observed him from a window. I looked out my bedroom window and saw him walking. I also heard a voice telling him to walk in the opposite direction, she wrote. Kanika was now so concerned over her own safety that she found it difficult to sleep. To help ease her mind, she decided she was going to install a new security system in her apartment. I am now trying to get an alarm system installed in my apartment. I had one at my old apartment, but I just hadn't had it transferred over to my new one, she wrote in her email. Just 4 days after this initial interaction, Kanika received another knock at her door. According to Kanika's previous email that she had sent out, she had already alerted police about the suspicious incident from before. I called the local police as well to give them a description just in case someone is out there trying to take advantage of or harm single women. Pass this on, ladies. This is not a fake forward. This is me, Kanika, who knows who these guys are and what they are doing in what areas other than mine, she had written in the letter. This time the knock came at 7 p.m. When she looked through the peephole, she noticed it was not the same man that had come the other day. He said, "Are you Kiki Powell?" And she said yes. Kanika's mother recalled what her daughter told her about the incident. She asked him what he wanted and he said he had a package for her. Suspicious, she didn't open the door. The man told her that he would get the package from his car and bring it to her, but when he disappeared, he never came back. The next morning, at around 7 a.m., there was yet another knock at Kanika's door. This person, yet again, claimed to have a package for her. She didn't answer the door and the man eventually left. Kanika was so unsettled by the incident that she called her mother to let her know what had happened. She knew it would be very unlikely for a normal delivery person to be dropping off a package so early in the morning.
She called me early, 7 or 7:30, and she said, someone knocked on my door again, saying they had a package for me. She said, it's 7:30 in the morning. Who delivers packages this early? When I look back on it, I could kind of hear the fear in her voice.
Kanika was going to take a trip out of town for work, and she had a few errands she needed to take care of beforehand. She was too afraid to wait until after work to do her errands because she didn't want to be out and about alone after dark. She ended up just calling off of work that day and went out to finish all her errands before noon. Unfortunately, when Kanika returned home to her apartment late morning that day, a dark figure was waiting for her. Before she could even process what was happening, he shot her several times with a handgun before fleeing the scene. A neighbor heard the gunshots and called 911. When the police arrived, Kanika was found lying unconscious on the ground near her apartment door.
One of Kanika's neighbors in the building heard gunshots and came out into the hallway and found Kanika laying in front of her apartment door.
She was rushed to the hospital, and doctors did everything they could to save her life. Meanwhile, Judy received the news that her daughter had been shot. She rushed quickly to be with Kanika.
When we got up to the hospital, she was in grave condition. That Thursday evening, they had run a brainwave test on her and saw that there was no brain activity.
Unfortunately, it was too late, and she passed away the next day. When police first began their investigation, they didn't really know where to start looking. When they spoke with Kanika's family, they learned that she didn't have any known enemies that would be out to hurt her. She didn't have a boyfriend and no bitter exes. Her keys and wallet had been found next to her after she had been shot, so it wasn't as if someone was trying to rob her. While some people close to Kanika wondered if her death had some connection to her very secretive job, there ended up being more to the story. The investigation took a turn just 2.5 months later, as it began to focus on 31-year-old Sean Nicholas Green. He worked in tech support at the National Counter-Terrorism Center. He was single, close to his family, and lived a quiet life. He had no known enemies. That's why the community was shocked when on November 12th of 2008, he was shot to death while in his car, not far away from where Kanika had lived. Sean would go to the gym every day around the same time and would use the same route. Because he was shot the way to the gym, it led some people to believe he had been likely stalked enough for someone to recognize his daily routine. But this still didn't explain why anyone would have wanted to hurt him. One explanation could be that it was simply a random act of violence and nothing deeper, or perhaps he had been mistaken for someone else. Because both Kanika and Sean were killed around the same time period, and both had top secret job responsibilities, some wondered if their deaths were connected. However, police found this to be unlikely because of the different styles of killings. For example, Sean's killer seemed to be more of a professional because they allegedly went to the effort to learn his routine. However, Kanika's stalkers visited her multiple times before making their move. This increased their chances of getting recognized and apprehended. Unfortunately, no arrests were ever made in connection to either killing. People have a lot of theories regarding what could have happened. Some believe Kanika was the victim of a serial killer. This theory is based on the fact that around the same time she was killed, a woman's body was located at the location of a house fire. Like Kanika, she had been shot in the torso. Whoever shot her then set the house on fire. The woman was 46-year-old Vilma Butler. Whether or not these crimes were related is still not known, and justice has never been served. However, today, some online sleuths are trying to piece together clues and get to the bottom of this case. Tana Lousy was a 38-year-old woman from Mesa, Arizona. It was the year 1982, and Tana had moved to this area from Iowa City around 18 years earlier. She and her husband had decided to get a divorce after having 2 sons together, Kevin and John. They came to the agreement that Kevin would stay with his mother, while John would stay behind and live with his father. Tana's husband worked at a car dealership, while Tana worked as a self-employed housekeeper. Everything changed for her on June 18, 1982. Tana's son Kevin, who was 18 at the time, claimed that his mother had gone over to visit a friend after running errands, but never ended up coming home. She was eventually reported missing, and a search went out across the town for her. Just 2 days later, Tana's vehicle, a Ford station wagon, was located inside a restaurant parking lot not far from her home. The vehicle had been abandoned. There had been 2 strange incidents prior to Tana's disappearance that her family thought could be relevant to the police investigation. They explained to the officer that the first incident occurred about a year prior. Tana had been minding her own business while driving through an area called Apache Junction, just a few miles away from her home, when all of a sudden, someone fired a gun at her. The bullet went through her passenger window and out the other side without injuring her. She didn't know who had shot her. The other incident occurred just a few months before Tana's disappearance. She had been at home when someone rang her doorbell. When she answered the door, she came face to face with a man who was dressed as a woman. The man carried mace, which he sprayed in her face. Tana managed to push the man out of her doorway, but not before he struck her several times, injuring her face. He then ran off into the distance. It definitely seemed as if someone had been out to get Tana and had some weird vendetta against her. Just around a month after Tana went missing, a group of hunters crossing through the desert stumbled upon clothed human remains. The body was badly decomposed and unrecognizable. However, through the use of dental records, it was determined that the body did in fact belong to Tana Lousy. She had been stabbed to death in the desert. There was no way to determine her time of death. While police didn't have any evidence that the prior two incidents had anything to do with Tana's ultimate demise, it certainly seemed that way. They believed that someone had been stalking Tana for a long time before finally taking her life. Unfortunately, police never managed to make any arrests involved in the case, and her family has yet to receive any sort of justice or closure.